There is a phase in relationships that almost no one notices when it begins, but it changes everything. Not because something obvious happens, but because something starts making sense in a way it shouldn't. It's the moment when your mind begins to explain things instead of questioning them. And once that shift happens, you are no longer just experiencing your life, you are quietly rewriting it. Not out loud, not to others, but inside your own head, to yourself. And the strange part is, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels reasonable. It feels justified. It feels like clarity. You tell yourself things that sound completely valid. I have done everything right for so long. I have been responsible. I have been patient. I have put others first. And somewhere in that thought process, a new idea enters. When do I get to live for myself? Now pause here, because that question is real. It's human. It matters. But what comes after that question is what shapes everything. Because now your decisions start getting filtered through a different lens. Not, is this right? But, do I deserve this? Don't I deserve happiness? Should I not live for myself? And once that shift happens, your boundaries don't disappear. They move. Quietly, gradually, invisibly. This often begins during certain moments in life. Moments that shake your sense of time. Like losing a parent, watching someone close to you go through something serious, or simply reaching a stage where you suddenly realize life isn't endless. You start thinking differently. You look at your years and you start measuring them. What you gave, what you didn't take, what you postponed, what you wanted, what you desired, and a feeling starts building. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady. I want to live. I don't want to miss my life. And again, that feeling is not the problem, but what you attach to it can quietly change your direction. Because now anything that makes you feel alive feels important, necessary, even justified. It could be a relationship, it could be alcohol, it could be substance. Add another layer to it. Life at home isn't always easy. There are responsibilities, expectations, patterns that have been repeating for years, conversations that never really go anywhere and that never get finished. silences that become normal. It is not always conflict. Sometimes it's just weight. The kind you carry without talking about it. And over time, you start associating home with effort, with responsibility, with discomfort, with things that need to be handled. And when something outside of that environment feels lighter, it stands out a lot. It could be a person, a conversation, an interaction that feels simple, easy, free of history, free from expectations. And in that space, you feel different, not burdened, not defined by a role. As a child, as a partner, as a parent, just yourself. And that contrast between what feels heavy and what feels light becomes powerful. Not logically, but emotionally. You don't sit down and analyze it. You feel it. And then your mind something very naturally does. It explains it. It is just nice to talk. It is harmless. I am not doing anything wrong. I deserve happiness. I deserve to feel this way sometimes. I can have friendships other than my partner. And all of those statements sound true. That is the problem. Rationalization doesn't come as a warning. It comes as agreement. It agrees with you, supports you, reassures you. It removes discomfort. Because instead of asking, why am I feeling this shift? You start saying, this makes sense. And when something makes sense, you stop questioning it. That's the moment when awareness begins to fade. Nothing changes dramatically. You are still living your life, still showing up, still doing what you are supposed to do. But something subtle has moved. Your attention, your emotional energy, where your thoughts go when you are not busy. And you may not even notice it, but you start looking forward to certain interactions, certain moments, certain conversations, more than others. And instead of stepping back and asking, you explain. It's just a phase. It's just stress. We are just talking. It's just friendship. Nothing wrong. It helps me cope. It makes me happy. And slowly, what you once would have questioned becomes something you defend, not to others, but to yourself. This is how the mind protects a behavior. It builds a story around it. A story where everything feels acceptable, where nothing seems harmful, where your actions feel aligned with your needs. And here's the part most people miss. There is a difference between something being understandable and something being aligned. Just because a feeling makes sense doesn't mean the direction it takes you in is right. And this is where things quietly start to separate what you are experiencing and what you are actually doing. Because while your intentions may still feel good, your behavior starts adjusting very slightly. You begin to filter what you share, not completely, just enough. You simplify certain parts of your day. You omit certain interactions. Leave out details. Not because you're trying to lie, but because explaining feels difficult, complicated, uncomfortable. And that is where honesty changes form. It doesn't disappear. It becomes selective. And selective honesty creates distance. Even if everything looks normal on the surface. Now here's a question most people avoid asking. Are you moving towards something meaningful or shying away from something uncomfortable? Because those two directions feel exactly the same in the beginning. Both feel like relief. Both feel like progress. Both feel like something you need. But one leads to growth. The other leads to avoidance. And avoidance doesn't solve anything. It just relocates the problem. If something at home feels heavy and you don't address it, that weight doesn't disappear. It stays unresolved, unspoken, heavier, and still waiting. And anything that gives you temporary relief from it starts feeling more valuable than it actually is. Because it is not just giving you something, it is removing something. And that removal feels powerful. But it is temporary. Because eventually you return to the same reality, the same environment, the same unresolved pieces. And now here's a gap between where you are and where your emotional energy has been going. And that gap slowly grows, not loudly, but quietly, through small shifts, small justifications, small decisions that feel reasonable in the moment. Until one day, something feels different. And you can't fully explain when it changed. You don't even want to. That is the nature of this stage. It doesn't announce itself. It blends in. It feels normal, logical, even necessary. But it's actually a turning point. Because this is where direction is decided. Not through one big action, but through a series of internal permissions you grant yourself. Permissions that slowly move you away from alignment, without making you feel that you have done anything wrong. Because that is why this stage matters so much. Because nothing has been broken yet. Nothing has been exposed. Nothing looks damaged. Which means this is where awareness still has power. where you can still pause, still question, still step back and ask yourself honestly, not am I wrong, but am I being fully real with myself? Am I explaining something to myself instead of actually examining it? Am I solving what is difficult or just running away from it? Because the answers to those questions will tell you everything before things move any further, before explanations become habits, before distance becomes normal, before something small turns into something that is much harder to undo. This is where it begins. Not with action, not with intention, but with a story that feels true. A story that you tell yourself, even when it is quietly taking you somewhere else. It begins with rationalization.